This video is how to annotate and do work in your Springboard book, especially when the teacher is going to check it for close reading and annotations, and when you're covering a writing piece that you have to read through the book, especially if you're going to be tested on it or going to write an essay about it. So first of all, this sample here is from the beginning of the book, page 6. It's the essay, Veterans Day, Never Forget Their Duty. You probably want to read this before you watch this video so that you can understand what it is that we're talking about. Okay, when you start a new Springboard reading, you don't want to skip over the first part. You want to read this part because it's going to give you information. So in this one, it tells you that overall we're looking at defining a word, idea, or concept. And then it tells you specifically that we're looking at definition by exemplification. And then it tells you what that is right here. You want to make sure to read this over and understand. And then also, when you see things like this over to the side where it says literary terms, exemplification, and it tells you what it is, you want to also pay attention to these things and maybe write notes to yourself, because these are the kinds of things that also end up on a test or exam. Then it'll preview and tell you what you're going to be doing. It says here you're going to read an essay by John McCain that serves as an extended definition of the word patriot. So it tells you that you're going to read an essay about an extended definition of the word patriot, and then it tells you what to do here. When it says set a purpose for reading, it tells you to underline phrases that exemplify a definition of patriot, and it tells you to circle unknown words and phrases and try to determine the meaning of those words by using context clues, parts of the words, or dictionary. Then you also want to read about the author. This tells you that John McCain was a senator and that he was also a father, a grandfather, and a Vietnam vet. So in addition to reading all this and following these directions, you also want to do a close reading in general, which the teacher may have given you a handout like this with close reading directions. So you want to follow those at least loosely as well, especially in terms of knowing the rhetorical situation. So right here, notice that first we predicted Veterans Day, Never Forget Their Duty. We predict this will be about how we should appreciate veterans or Veterans Day. So there's a prediction right there. And then look at the date and you notice it's on November 10th before Veterans Day, and that it came from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, so this was published there. So in other words, this was published in 2002, right before Veterans Day. So now if we think about the rhetorical situation, we know that the subject is patriotism, the author is Senator McCain, and the first audience is the Milwaukee Journal readers, but the second audience is also Americans and students. So this is our rhetorical situation. We also noted here that the speaker is a veteran and a politician. So we're noticing those kinds of things right there. Okay, now let's look at the other things that we've noticed as we read through it. Here, you notice he starts off and says, let me tell you what I think about our Pledge of Allegiance, our flag, and our country. Notice that the use of our connects the author to the audience. So we're writing that his use of that wording is a rhetorical strategy that he uses to, right from the outset, establish a connection with his reader and his audience. We also notice that there's anaphora and parallelism going on here. And then when he goes on in the next paragraph where he talks about he spent 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton, that he's building ethos here. He's building credibility because he's showing you and demonstrating that he is someone who is reliable to talk about patriotism and veterans and America, basically. Then he goes on here as well to describe how in 1971 the North Vietnamese moved them from isolation into large rooms, and he gives you some more facts. Here we circled a word you may not know, POW, and over here to the side, prisoner of war we defined it. So this goes back to right here where it tells you need to circle words you don't know and figure out what they mean. Because again, those could come up on tests as well. Here you notice he starts to talk about this character Mike. He's building some pathos here. He's appealing to emotion. You could say sympathy, because he's telling you that when he came from a small town, he didn't have shoes and came from kind of a harder background. So we put a question, is this building sympathy for Mike? Then it goes on to the next page. Here we see another word, keen. You may not know that, so we circle it and define it off to the side. Notice he's using dashes. Right here, the reader noticed that there's parenthetical parentheses used right here, parenthetical phrases, and also perhaps noted that this might be an attempt at humor. Again, periodic sentences. And here, off to the side where it says, we would hang Mike's shirt on the wall of our cell and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So we're noticing this is patriotism, and he anticipates that the average reader doesn't think much of the pledge. So we're noticing kind of what he's doing as a strategy as a writer. Down here we notice some other things, like he's using euphemisms. When they bring back Mike from beating him, he says he was not in good shape. So that's a euphemism. There's imagery of 4 naked light bulbs in each corner of the room to kind of build the scene of what it was like. And then right here, he says, sitting there beneath the dim light bulbs with a piece of white cloth, a piece of red cloth, another shirt, and his bamboo needle was my friend Mike Christian. Again, this is about patriotism. Despite being beaten for it, he continues to honor the flag. So notice the reader also is making notes, utilizing this notes column to make notes to themselves and make sense of what is happening in the reading. And then lastly, you see here the pink highlight to signify the main claim or the main idea behind the whole article, which in this case is, we see here, he says, how important it was for us to be able to pledge our allegiance to the flag and country, duty, honor, country. So we can see that these are his main ideas, the importance of the pledge, your allegiance to your flag and country, and that's what he's talking about by using the extended example of Mike Christian. Then we write a note here. McCain uses both his own suffering as well as Mike's suffering to exemplify what a patriot is. So this goes back to our purpose for reading, which it told us right here, that we're looking for the ways that the author is exemplifying what a patriot is, and he does that by giving us the example of Mike Christian and how he was beaten for making an American flag and then made it again anyways. Also, we're noticing the tone and thinking of what words can we use to describe the tone for this. Maybe passionate, sentimental, austere, didactic. So you want to think of words to describe the tone. Then you also, by the time you're done reading, you want to think of what is the author's overall purpose and whatnot. So in terms of annotating, when you have a Springboard text, this is what you're looking for. You want to have clear evidence on the margins, within the text, all over it, that you've read this text, you've interacted with it, you've done a close reading of it, and you're aware of what it is you're supposed to be looking for as you read it. Now let's look at, typically, after you read something like this in Springboard, there's going to be questions after the story. And if you turn over on page 8 of your book, it's going to say second read. And it's going to tell you to reread it, which is what we did. Write any additional questions, so sometimes you can also use the margin to write questions that you have or may have. This would also be useful for when we talk about the text. And then here, you're going to answer a couple of questions. Notice that the answers to these questions are written out in full sentences. So for example, number 1 says, using details from paragraphs 4 to 5, what inference can you make about how McCain feels about Mike Christian? And we say, McCain admires Mike because he overcame tough obstacles in his youth, such as not having shoes, and was a brave pilot. And question 2 says, in paragraph 14, McCain changes the noun pledge of allegiance to a verb, pledge our allegiance. How does the connotation change when he does this? And we say, the shift makes it more personal and urgent. The pledge is something people are required to recite. As a verb, it is a choice POWs are making. And the third question, what is McCain's definition of patriot? According to McCain, comma, it is someone who embodies, quote, duty, honor, country. A patriot is someone who loves their country so much they risk personal injury. So again, you want to make sure when you're answering the questions, you're answering in complete sentences. Don't answer in short little 1 or 2 word sentences. That will not get you good credit. So overall, when you're working with Springboard, this is what the teacher expects you to see, expects to see to get a good grade on the work that you've done. In addition, pay attention that afterwards, if there's any writing to sources kind of stuff, if the teacher wants you to do this as well.